Hey, I think we're here. Good morning. Good morning, America. That's a different show. Hey, it's Mark Reardon, and we're gonna try something a little different here with the video. First and foremost, I had to put a shirt on for the first time, or something other than a t-shirt or a hoodie in a while. I guess I do that when I do Great Day St. Louis on Friday. This is my friend Rick Neiner, who grew up here in St. Louis with me and lives in Las Vegas. Good morning, Rick.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm good. So the goal, you and I, we go way back. We actually started in radio back in 1980 or 81. I mean, I'm approaching 40 years in radio. You were smart. You got out of it. You work a real job. But Rick and I have been very close friends for all that time. And we started kind of, in a movie vein, if you will, because we were like Siskel and Ebert back in the 80s arguing about movies, right?
We were. I remember one year, I think we saw 82 movies, if you remember. I remember specifically counting it, and I think there was one year where we saw 82 movies in one year. It was an amazing number. We literally went to see every movie that had been released.
Yeah, that was before I was technically a critic, whatever that means. But we did. We went to a lot of first-run movies here, and we would argue it out. But we also have these conversations back and forth, and he's joined me on KMOX before about politics, about the culture, about where we are right now. I don't want to describe your politics, so I'll let you do that. You know where I am, and I think there's commonality here because I would always say I'm libertarian conservative. So, there's certain things that have come up topic-wise that I just haven't given a rip about, gay marriage included, legalization or decriminalization of drugs, things along those lines.
Yeah, I agree. First of all, I do want to make a comment. We are strikingly different in our musical selection. You have behind you a complete list of vinyl, and if you notice, I'm still stuck in CDs behind me. Although I will confess, we are similar because my vinyl collection is in the other room. So we do have something that we can come together on, even as conservatives.
Yeah, growing collection of vinyl. There's no doubt.
But I would have to say that I grew up in St. Louis. I grew up conservative. As I have grown older, I have gone more to the center. I would consider myself a moderate. I still find myself fiscally conservative, but more liberal with regards to social issues. And I have voted Republican in the past. I have voted Democrat in the past, and I have signed up as a Republican. So, however, I can honestly say that I haven't voted that way in quite some time. And there's reasons for that. So, I mean, I think it doesn't necessarily have to do with me living on the left coast, let's say, but I certainly think that some of my views changed as I moved, and I got more maybe considerate to some of the more social issues and understanding them a little bit better. So I think that's where I'll leave my affiliation with regards to politics.
But here's what's interesting in our conversations, and one of the reasons I wanted to do this is because you remember you came on, was it this year or the year before? Because I'm losing track of time. The Oscars, was it this year during the Oscars?
Earlier this year.
Got up there and they started ripping Trump and everything. And your point was what at that point?
My point, this is ridiculous. It's the same thing when Robert De Niro continues to go on The View and continues to bash the Trump. The liberals have to stop it because we just hand more fuel to the fire to the people that support this guy. It's been over 4 years. The bashing needs to stop with regards to what they do. They continually bash him, and all I said was, particularly in the Oscars, is it just comes off as social elitists, left, elitists. And it's ridiculous. That was absolutely my opinion.
You have a perspective on that because of your Missouri roots. You have your dad and your stepdad still live here. You have family. You know me. So we talk. You don't come back very often to St. Louis, but you know Missouri. And your dad lives in the central part of the state. And I think what you have is a nice balance because you would admit probably your friends, a lot of the people you hang out with in Las Vegas, or he also spends time, he's got a place in Pasadena, California as well because of work. But that these are people who would have no, I'm going deer hunting this weekend, right? You know that. They would think that's like, what in the hell are you doing? There's just no relatability between the West Coast and Missouri for a lot of people, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I think one of the interesting things, and I don't think it's a fault of growing up in the Midwest. I just think that I look at my growing up and how we did it. You know, we lived in West County. It was very segregated. We went to a predominantly all-white high school. I mean,
by the way,
and in my class, voted most likely to succeed was Augie Bush IV. I mean, of course he was voted most likely to succeed. So, I mean, it wasn't until I got out to California and into Las Vegas where I started to diversify my friends. And I have quite probably, I guess you would say, a rainbow coalition of friends. I have a lot of Hispanic friends, Asian friends, black friends. I have lesbians. I have gay friends. I have straight friends. And it wasn't until I got out and was able to broaden that at least it allowed me to hear and listen to other sides. It doesn't mean that I always agree, but it gave me a perspective. I think that's growing it up in West County, the perspective was the same exact perspective. It's the same thing. We all kind of agreed. We all lived together, predominantly white. You know what I mean? I don't ever remember a different race living in my neighborhood. So it gave me a different perspective. Yeah.
Let me kind of address some of the things that we've talked about from a different perspective this morning, because, and I got to put the reading glasses on here because I thought this was interesting. So you have Katy Perry sent a tweet out that basically, encouraged people to reach out to their friends who supported Trump and to say, look, let's kind of get past this. We understand, just basically making a bridge of bipartisan, friendship, if you will. Well, many people on the left, including people who live out where you do, thought that was ridiculous because these are people that are hate-filled, they're bigoted, they're racist, they're everything, all these things. They are deplorable. We don't want anything to do with them. I read an LA Times column last week which basically said the same thing because a good portion of California still voted for President Trump. It wasn't nearly enough to win in a state like that. But now you have a situation where people, we're not going to do well moving forward with this, right? I guess we all think that maybe we can put some of this stuff behind us and move forward, but this country is divided more than ever. And if Katy Perry or someone tries to do something that is seemingly pretty, pretty friendly and not that controversial, it turns into controversy.
Yeah, well, but everything does now, and I think it's a shame. There's nothing that is going to change somebody's mind, and it seems as if you voted for Joe Biden, that means whatever it is, the Trump team is against you, and you need to be defeated at all costs. And it's the other way around. And any time you try to bridge that gap, anytime you try to reach into the middle, your team or the team that you may be potentially supported, and I say teams because I think this has become a sporting event. I really do. Yeah. Your team suddenly turns against you, and it's like, hey, come on! I'm reaching out, and I think that's the biggest problem that we have. I think absolutely the biggest problem is an unwilling to listen to the other side, whether you agree with them or not. And I also think that is compounded by the fact that we get bombarded on social media by whatever we believe. It just continues to feed into that, and therefore we feel we have some sort of validation in our opinion. It's exactly right now with the contesting of the election. So far, there hasn't really been any substantiated evidence that this was a fraudulent election, and yet you've got 71 million people that absolutely, without any credible evidence, believe it was. I don't know how you change that. I don't know how you change it.
70% of Republicans feel like there was funny business, and this is the president's tweet this morning. Watch for massive ballot counting abuse, and just like the early vaccine, remember I told you so. Now, Rick, what I've said on my show the past couple of days, and I'll say this today, look, I think there was probably some fraud that we can root out in some states. I get an email, though, from somebody who's a listener this morning, heard me talking about this, and he's got talking point by talking point about how George Soros was involved. Look, I think George Soros gets involved in politics the same way that the Koch brothers and other, Republicans get involved. But the thing that is baffling to me, and I don't know where we go with this, I have people that I know. There's a guy, I think I told you this story. There's a guy that has become a friend. His name is Chris. I call him Chris in the country. But he called me a month before the election in 2016. I was insistent there's no way Trump's going to win. If Trump wins, I'm going to shave my head on the air. You can come in and take the first swipe. Well, we know what happened. And then Chris calls that Wednesday after the election. He goes, dude, you don't have to shave your head. But he is insistent now and is not able to get away. And by the way, he is not alone, that this is rigged. There's no way this happened, that there's massive voter fraud. And I've asked him, I said, look, can you just point me in the direction of 10 or 20,000 votes? You have to come up with more than 500, 1,000. Now, maybe there was some fraud. We should investigate that. I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but there are people that, in my mind, they're not going to be able to get away from this, Rick, at all. They'll always think that this was stolen, not unlike what in fairness, the Democrats said this after 2016 as well. They just linked it with Russia.
Well, but it was also different. I mean, there was a lot of false information on that. Russia didn't vote. Russia didn't change votes. What Russia did was bombard social media with false propaganda to try to convince maybe 1 or 2% of the people that were on the fence to change their vote. And we know that happened. But they didn't do, dead people didn't vote. There wasn't vans of supposed ballots that were driven to the Canadian border. So you didn't have that. But the other thing that I think is interesting is this constant distrust in media.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about it is if you go back to 2016, media called the election the exact same way they called this election. They didn't hesitate when Donald Trump won the election to immediately call the election. And it was done the exact same way, looking at the votes coming in, tabulating what had happened. Now you have this other side that is screaming and hollering that the media doesn't call the election, the people do. And so I don't know how it changes. I don't know how we get better. And by the way, electing Joe Biden doesn't solve this problem. It doesn't. And re-electing Donald Trump doesn't solve this problem. So I don't know. I mean, I think what hopefully will happen is whatever the outcome here, and I certainly hope that the Supreme Court does not get involved in this. I hope that we let these challenges kind of go. If there was some foul play, it's investigated. Like you said, I don't see it going to be 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 votes in multiple states, which is going to ultimately change it. And I think, you hope what happens is that, maybe, the process works. If Joe Biden is elected president, at least we can tone down the rhetoric. But again, I'm going to say this. There are 71 million people in this country that voted for this president, and they're not going to go away. And the Democrats have to figure out how to bridge that gap because the Republicans are not going to
go. Denial. Yeah, I think they're in denial about it. But let's pivot to the media. And this is very important. It's one of the things, this because I talk about on my show and have for as long as I've been doing talk radio. Bernie Goldberg, who used to work at CBS, wrote the book Bias almost 20 years ago. And we've talked about media bias, Bernie and I, many times. But here's what's happening right now. And going back to my comment about how some people refuse to accept the consequences or even understand here. Let me give you an example of a vote dump, right? Well, when you get a dump from the middle of Missouri that is heavily red, 85% of those votes are going to be for Donald Trump. The flip side is true in Milwaukee or Detroit. So it's not that hard when you think about the percentages, you break it down. But Rick, people don't trust the media for good reason. And I've sat here very frustrated for 4 years seeing CNN and the mockery that Kavanaugh's nomination was made into, the Covington Catholic kids, you name it, and just things around this president who I haven't liked personally, but I think that, and he brings this on himself, he has been treated unfairly. So now you have a situation where the media perhaps should be trusted because everyone is on the same page, Fox, CNN, everyone's on the same page, but they're not trusted. And I don't know how you rebuild that trust.
I don't know if you do. I mean, it's the same way with social media. I mean, the reality is we have these monsters that are Twitter and Facebook and Reddit as a social platform that have been allowed to run freely because they want to make money and they want to keep us on. And then suddenly when they decide they're going to get a backbone and start to kind of fact check stuff, while it may be something that they should have done years ago, the reality is stepping in and doing it now, it just ignites the right by saying, look what social media is doing. It's too much too late at this point. I don't know. I really don't. I think the problem is, and I think it is, we're all living in our own little Truman Show. We get the information that we want, regardless of whether it's true. Kellyanne Conway was absolutely correct in the statement that she made years ago when she said we have alternative facts. They weren't true facts, but they were looked at them as alternative facts, and now everybody has their own alternative facts.
And I don't even know as a talk show host, because I have sources that I trust, and I try to take every situation and look at it fairly and not prejudge. Human nature is we prejudge something, but this goes back to Mike Brown and what happened here in Ferguson. It's difficult for me as someone who, delivers some of this information to know sometimes what's true and what's not. I want to believe what most outlets are telling me about the voter fraud, but I don't trust them. And if I don't trust them, a lot of people don't trust them.
Well, but I also think the thing that you do different is you don't rely on an open platform like Facebook or Twitter to get your information. You also look at multiple sources. I mean, you do consume what tends to be some conservative newspapers, but you also read what is tended to be some liberal newspapers. And for the most part, if you find some consistency in that story, you kind of have to tend to believe that it's true. I mean, I think that is some sort of validation. The problem is that there are a lot of people in this country that under any circumstances don't believe anything that they read unless it fits their narrative. And that, I don't know how we bridge that gap unless we can come as a group to some sort of specific truth. Say, this is the truth. And we used to be able to do that because we didn't have as many outlets. When you really only had 3 television stations, we all could come to some fundamental truth. But look, the reality is this is no different than how it was 45 years ago when you had these naysayers thinking about that the landing on the moon wasn't real. It was. The only difference is that every one of these things become conspiracy theories. Instead of having one conspiracy theory was, we really didn't land on the moon, it was all made up. We have hundreds of conspiracy theories that are dumped onto social media, and people pick up on it and they read it and then they validate themselves.
Yeah, real life. By the way, did we really landed on the moon? But a couple of real life examples of this. Right after the election, I would get a meme or a screen capture from someone that said, in these states, there were more people who were registered, or more people that voted than were registered, and that wasn't true. There's still some irregularities, but look, they have same-day registration. The numbers weren't necessarily updated, but it doesn't matter because people, they hear about the dead voters. There are explanations for some of these things.
Absolutely.
There are. Those are the things that we need to look into, present to judges, and then judges decide whether or not there's cause to investigate further to have a ruling. But we have people that just are not going to believe.
Wisconsin is a perfect example. And by the way, that whole thing that you're talking about more people voted than were registered got twisted around, and suddenly I'm hearing from people, wow, there's 1.5, and this is how distorted the facts get. I'm actually hearing from people, take Wisconsin, for example. 1.5 people live in the state and 1.7 million people voted. I'm like, well, that's not true. 6 million people live in the state. And, it's almost like the telephone game when you used to play that game where you'd whisper someone was here. And by the time you got to the end, it was completely different. And that's what's exactly happening now. I don't know how you change it. And I agree with you. Most of these states, I know in the state of Nevada, you could go up the day of the election, you had to show your ID and some sort of validation of where you live. You could register and vote right that day. So the tabulations on registered voters prior to that and who actually voted is going to be different. We could have very well, in this state, I don't know the statistics or the details, we could have had 150,000 people that registered to vote that day, and so it would have made those. In
the case of some of the other, examples, they were using some of the totals from 2018, and we've had, tens, if not hundreds of thousands in some states. So look, good conversation. I'd like to continue it. We chat all the time on the phone and we argue, but we get along also, and we don't have those situations where maybe it'll get a little tense, but where it is not exploded. I've had situations, I don't know if you've had situations where we've lost friendships because of politics, and I just think that's a terrible thing.
By the way, I do want to go back to your Katy Perry thing because I I'm really disappointed in liberals. And I understand, I made an example that this is a lot like sports, except, we joke, I root for the Raiders, and when they play the Chiefs, of course I want them to beat the Chiefs, and I want to rub it in your head. But my Raiders also don't embody abortion and gay rights and gun control and religion. It's just a sport. The problem is we've taken politics to that level, and it carries all that stuff. So I can understand this difficulty in people looking at the other side and saying you're against me because your vote does something to me. I think it's really important, though. I really believe that what Katy Perry is right. I think we have to keep those lines of communication open. And I will say this about the Democrats. If at the end of the day they won this election, and I'm going to go back to this, they need to remember 71 million people in this country voted for this president. If you're on the side of Joe Biden, you can look at this and say, how could you vote for a guy who we believe has been somewhat racist, has been callous with regards to the coronavirus, but they still voted. 71 million people. We have got to figure out a way to bridge that gap. Republicans and Democrats have to find that way. We cannot continue to live in this divisiveness, because if we do, I don't think it goes.
Let's fast forward 4 years. What are you live in Vegas? What are the odds? What do the odds boards say right now? Not very good on that. But look, we'll have these conversations. I know that you're just starting your day out there out west. So thanks, Rick. And we'll continue to do these and talk about some of these issues. So I appreciate it.
One last question. Do the Packers cover the 14-point spread on Sunday?
Not the way the NFL has been going. No, they play the Jaguars, right? I would say do not take the.
Okay. You know what? See, we can have a good debate. It's fine.
I haven't hit a parlay with my bookie out there. I'll be sending some stuff this weekend. We'll see.
I know your bookie very well.
See ya.
We'll talk.